Want awesome tabletop games delivered right to your door? Sign up now for Gamebox Monthly. Learn more at GameboxMonthly.com. Yes, let's talk about it indeed. Welcome to Elaborate. It is a very special episode. Remember in the 80s and 90s, sitcoms used to have a very special episode. This is one of those, you guys. No introduction is going to do my guest any justice. Justice, interesting use of terms, because she's a criminal defense attorney. Maybe you've seen her doing incredible work on stuff like Dateline NBC. But she's also a yogi. But she's also my sister. I'm sitting down with one of the coven. It's Celia Gordon. Hi, Celia.
Hi, Jake.
How are you?
I'm good.
I am so happy to be home in your establishment called The Workshop.
Yes.
Here in Huntington, Long Island.
The place of goodness.
The place of goodness. That's what you.
Our goodness center.
The goodness
center. As opposed to a wellness center, which is like.
Right.
Way overused and misused.
Right.
So.
And it's very vague, a wellness center. What does that even mean?
Yeah. Right.
So I could already tell you before we even get into discussing that one episode of a podcast could never encapsulate the things that at least I personally find fascinating about you.
Ooh.
And about our history and about our family. So I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to be the first of many. I think every time I come here, we're going to have to do this. People who listen to the show, if they are listening regularly, are very familiar with my relationship or lack thereof with my father, our father. Celia is my half sister. We have the same father and different mothers.
He did two fabulous things in his life.
Yeah, he did two fabulous things in his life. And then after that.
And he has no idea how fabulous they are. Right? That's like the weird part about it.
We don't know. Do we know that he doesn't know how fabulous?
No, that's true. In the era of Facebook and the internet, and he may. So
for the listeners who might not be entirely familiar, the quick rundown is, my father and your mother were divorced, and then he met my mother. You at this point, you were already 9 years old, and so you had him as a father up until 9,
right?
And then he
father of mine.
Yeah, exactly. He then left my mother when she was pregnant with me, or what, that whole thing. And so I didn't have him around. So we sometimes play the game of you had it worse. No, you had it worse. I believe that you at 9 years old had your father taken away from you, or like, I think that I had it easier because I just never had him to begin with. And you've told me like, oh no, well, you missed having. So sometimes we play that game.
Yeah. This is actually an interesting topic, because I think that for two people who have experienced what we have in a lack of a father, I think we're at a really good place. Both of us. I
hope. I think so.
And that
people who listen to the show might think otherwise about me.
No, but I think that we've both been through a lot of ups and downs and had a lot of mixed emotions about him over the years. And I would hope that anyone who's listening who's had similar experience with a parent who, who has abandoned them or has been less than a parent could kind of get something out of our experience and realize that there is a time to kind of, stop the hate and the anger and the resentment and to really genuinely move on.
True. And I have had people who have told me like, Jake, you're really hanging on a lot. And I'm not going to argue that sense. I think I'm in a different point where I am at this point in my life. I'm maybe using it more. I'm using the feelings that I have about what happened to me. And I'm also at an age now where I'm seeing them a lot more clearly. Than when I was in my early 20s or even my mid 20s. I'm at a point now where I see the entire situation differently.
Right.
I feel like I have more information now than I used to have. So yeah, some might even tell me like it's time to just stop talking about your dad on this podcast, or inversely. And also, admittedly, it's a shtick that I do. I mean, if literally a friend gives me crap, like if my friend makes fun of me for something unrelated, I'll just go, yeah, well, guess what? I have a dad. It's part of a caricature that I play.
And every time you look in the mirror, you're reminded.
That's not
for
wrong.
those of you who have never seen Jake Lloyd,
more importantly, who've never seen my father, which is more likely.
If he is.
Yeah, I'm a walking clone.
Yeah, a walking clone.
And my mother is in complete denial.
Total denial.
She believes that I have her family's everything, and everybody in the entire family looks at her and goes, "You're crazy."
Yeah.
I mean, look at him.
Yeah.
It's a photograph.
Well, my mother was married to our father when he was your age,
right?
And younger, and was the only person in our lives right now who knew him at that age when he was your age.
Yeah.
Right. So
like
my mother,
before he had the big bushy beard and before
like right out of the Navy, thin and, looking like you.
Gotcha.
And so she sees you and she always says, wow, it's like uncanny.
Yeah. So your mother, Sue, I've spoken about you both on this podcast previously. You are two of the members of what I lovingly describe as the coven, the group of women who are all responsible.
Stood in the backyard around a cauldron and would whip up spells to whip you into shape.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's,
Jake, drink this.
It's you and my other big sister, Melissa. It is my mother, my godmother, Deanna, who's my aunt. Your mother, Sue, which is so weird. Growing up, I always called your mom Aunt Sue, and people were like, wait, how is she your aunt? And I'd be like, oh, that's my dad's ex-wife. And my mom and her are close friends. It's so weird.
Yeah.
It's absolutely mind-boggling. But I love that my mother uses the term sister friend.
Yeah, sister friend.
My sister friend, Sue. That's adorable.
That's very sweet.
And then the last member of the coven was a woman named Rose Crawford, who was a family friend who's since passed, who was like,
she was your babysitter.
Yeah, I guess she was my babysitter.
Yeah.
But she stayed around in my life long after a babysitter was necessary. And I feel like I was really, truly sculpted by these women. And I feel like a lot of who I am comes from that. And obviously I had incredible male role models. I had Uncle Paul. I had my older brother. But it's different when they're not there every single day. And as much as they were around, I mean, you guys were always around. I mean, I can't think of, as a child, I can't think of a day that I didn't see probably every one of you, But in any case, so that is our daddy issues. And I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention that, being that it became a theme on this show pretty abruptly when I had like 3 or 4 people on who all had a story about their father, and then it sort of became this like,
what's your story, Jake?
So we did that.
Crickets.
Yeah, exactly. But you, as an individual, outside of the man who created us and bailed, you're absolutely fascinating to me. Now, because of other issues within our family, I didn't know you from the time that I was like 10 to 18. As families do, they get into fights and things, and you and I were both sort of victims of other people's problems, unrelated to each other. So we never had any problems, and how could we? I was 8, you know?
Yeah.
I will never forget the day that I was a senior in high school, and I hadn't seen you in years. And I was up on stage in a high school play, and it was one of those scenes in a play where it's a blackout on half the stage and lights are up on the other half. And the second my half of the stage blacked out, my 17-year-old long-haired nerdy theater kid is panning the audience, just seeing around, and I see my mom. Oh, there's Mom. I see Rose Crawford, the aforementioned. Oh, and then I see this blonde girl and this tall, lanky white dude. And I was like, holy shit, that's Celia. Holy shit, my sister's here.
Yeah.
And I'm getting emotional just remembering that right now.
Oh, God, I remember that too.
It was,
I'll never forget that.
I literally couldn't get through the rest of the play. Like, every time I would go to the backstage area, my friends from high school were like, what's wrong? Why are you crying? And I'm like, my sister's here. And they're like, so did you not want her to come? Like, why? They don't understand. I haven't seen you in a decade.
Yeah.
But so I sort of really wasn't around your coming to age. I wasn't around for you to go to, I didn't see you go to college. I didn't see you, by the time I met your husband, he was already your husband.
Yeah.
I never met him as a boyfriend or a fiance.
And I remember our sister and brother wanting to sneak you out to come to my wedding.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I was aware of that
Yeah, it was a
conspiracy that was
It's
happening.
That's a whole other show.
Really?
But in any event,
one day I was just told that I had a sister who was a lawyer.
yeah.
I didn't. It wasn't something that I witnessed happen. The evolution of you becoming a lawyer.
It's really wild to me, and what I get the biggest kick out of, like, biggest kick, that makes it sound so little, but I'm so proud of you and everything that you're doing, because it's what I love to do. And I went to school. I went to my undergrad degree was in broadcast journalism.
Wait, what?
Yeah, you didn't know that?
No,
Okay,
I didn't.
Jake,
How would I know
my
this?
God. Okay, so I don't believe we never talked about this. So I was a broadcast journalism major in undergrad in Buffalo, which is why I chose Buffalo State, because out of all the state schools, it had an excellent journalism program.
Okay.
And I interned at the NBC and CBS affiliates in Buffalo as on AM Buffalo,
Right.
Which was a program, a morning show in Buffalo, and then on the 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock news, I was an intern, and I wanted to be a newscaster, and so
I can't believe I'm hearing this for the first time right now.
Yeah, and so what happened was when I was so my entire undergrad was all in broadcasting, and so I then went to I had a resume tape, and came out of college with this great resume tape that they made for me at the NBC affiliate. So it was like this really cool tape. Although my husband jokes that, because there's one of the segments, I'm like on the side of the road in a trench coat reporting.
Right.
And he says I'm really more like Kermit the Frog. But so but it was a great resume tape, and but I really wanted to be in front of the camera, and at that time I had a boyfriend who lived in
that wasn't
Corey.
Oh,
you may have remembered him, right? So
maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, so he was around when he was my boyfriend when you were little. And
oh, really?
Yeah. Like we have pictures of that time. Yeah. So I had a boyfriend I was very attached to and didn't really want to move away
like
from him.
Like a high school sweetheart that turned into a college sweetheart?
Yeah, no, like we met right after high school, and we were together all through college, and so I didn't want to move away.
Right.
And really in broadcasting in journalism, I would have had to go on
wherever you can get a job.
And so I thought, well, rather than moving away and getting a job at a tiny little station and where I was the cameraman and I was, doing everything.
Yeah. Literally
I
doing
thought,
what I do now as a filmmaker.
Yeah. And I had spent a lot of time when I was interning on a racketeering trial in Buffalo. Mm-hmm. The parks commissioner in Buffalo had been indicted. And so I was assigned to be with the reporter who was on the court beat. And so I was with him in court and every day, and we would take breaks and he would go and, report like over the phone and call in and
keep everybody up to date.
Yeah. And it was so fascinating to me because I was only like really absorbing a quarter maybe of what was happening in the trial. And, like really intrigued me that he would leave the courtroom and be able to so quickly and concisely put into words what was going on.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? It might be really cool instead of just being a general reporter to have a specialty. So I thought, why not go to law school?
Right.
And that's what led me to go to law school. And I didn't go to law school to become a lawyer. I went to law school to be a court TV reporter.
Wait, what? To be a court TV reporter?
So that's what I thought. I thought I'll go to law school, and that way I'll know what I'm talking about when I'm reporting.
So you'll just be you'll be a better reporter.
I'll be a better reporter. Yeah. So that's why I went to law school. And so in law school, that was my thought.
Right.
And so I kind of viewed myself initially differently than all of my fellow
peers,
students, because I thought, well, I'm
you
not
had a different end game.
Yeah, you guys have fun with this law thing, but I'm just getting information. I'm information gathering, and then during the course of my law school, years, I wound up finding that I was really good at trial work, and there was a trial team, and I was asked to try out for the trial team. And
what is a trial team? Is that like
it's like a mock trial? Like you would do mock trials and so travel.
It's like an academic club.
Yeah, and we would go to different places. They had competitions around the country, and so I went to Rhode Island and San Antonio, Texas, and with my trial team, and we came in first place in San Antonio, Texas, in this trial competition for the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers.
Okay.
And it was so much fun. And I thought, this is a really similar rush that I get
Right.
from being in front of the camera to, the performance of being in court and, but there was something so meaningful about it. And in the process of that, doing that kind of performance part of the trial work, I also started interning. I interned first, interestingly enough, in the district attorney's office.
Really?
And I say interestingly enough because I wound up going on to be for 17 years a criminal defense attorney.
Yeah.
But I started out in the DA's office interning, and it so fascinated me. And I initially thought, this is what I want to do. Criminal law is so interesting. And so I'm going to be a prosecutor, hands down. This is what I want to do. I'm going to fight crime.
Wow. You really leaned the opposite direction eventually.
Yeah. And then what happened was during my third year of law school, I wound up being in a clinic, a criminal justice clinic at our law school. And so I was representing indigent clients in criminal cases. So I was the defense attorney.
Right.
And I got to see it from a different perspective.
And you didn't have was that something you didn't have a choice to do?
I did have a choice to do the clinic. I chose to do the clinic. But for me, at that time, I was kind of just soaking up anything I could relate it to criminal law.
In that, you might have already made a decision now to be a lawyer, but you're still in that, that's kind of who you are. I like to gather information.
Yeah.
You're a learner.
Yeah. I just want to learn everything I can about this area of the law. And so I loved the clinic. I mean, I loved representing people. And if there was somebody who, my fellow students and they couldn't go to court for some reason, I would volunteer immediately because it was so important to me. Like that the work was so important. And it was when I think I first kind of got really in touch with who I now know I am and really just caring about people as human beings.
And so that's something that being a defense attorney, you have a stigma. I'm sure that here's a phrase that you've heard plenty of time. How do you sleep at night?
Yeah.
Or that sort of thing. I mean, I when I explain to people oh yeah, my sister was a defense attorney, so it's that sort of so her job was to defend the worst of humanity. And I'd be like, well, no, because that's not a definition of somebody on trial. That may be a definition of somebody who's specifically found guilty without any, but it's her job to be in the middle.
So it's such a simple answer too. And I actually enjoy when people ask me that question, and because I feel like, okay, another person that I can educate.
Sure. Well,
another
person, sis,
another person that I can completely flip the way that you look at things. So for me, short of losing a child, right, the next most horrifying thing in life would be to be wrongfully convicted, right? To be locked up in prison, right? Hell on earth for something that you didn't do, right? That's pretty up there when it comes to horrifying things that could possibly happen to you. And the way that we protect against that is by making sure that everybody is treated equally when it comes to the criminal justice system. Because if you start saying that, well, you know what, he really seems guilty, and it really looks like there's a lot of evidence against him, so we know we don't have to go that extra mile and make sure that he's got adequate representation because he's probably guilty anyway.
Yeah.
Well, you know what?
It doesn't matter who his lawyer is.
Maybe 8 out of 10 of those guys or women are guilty, but there's going to be 1 or 2 who aren't.
And is that sort of the statistic? Is that an actual
number?
No,
I'm really just pulling that out.
Hypothetical.
But hypothetically, so what winds up happening is that it's a slippery slope. You say, well, that guy doesn't really deserve good representation, so we're not going to give it to him. But what if that person turned out to be someone who appeared guilty but actually wasn't?
Sure.
Right? Then we start to get into this murky area of allowing people to be prosecuted and not represented.
Sure.
The way that you would want to be represented if you were innocent. And so it's way more important to it's just as important to represent people who are guilty as to represent people who are innocent, because that's what keeps us all safe. That's what keeps the playing field level all the time, so that you know that if you've been wrongly accused of something, you know that you are afforded the opportunity to represent yourself, and that there are checks and balances in place under our system of justice, so that if the evidence is there, if the evidence is not there, that you will not be convicted. And I always say, and this is going to sound like, what are you kidding me? Wait, hold on a second. But if somebody can be guilty of a crime, but if the evidence is not there, they shouldn't be convicted. Right? We need evidence.
It makes sense, because that's our system.
That's our system. That's what protects us all,
and that's what
from
protects
wrongful conviction.
That's what protects the person who maybe was the victim as well. Like, it's the same. It works both ways.
It works both ways, and it's what keeps us all safe.
Sure.
And so that's why I chose criminal law, and that's why I really believe in what I do.
The second you did that clinic, then that was it. You were a defense attorney.
I wound up going to a civil firm. I did civil litigation for a year. Did a lot. I was in court a lot.
Yeah.
Got a lot of very quick hands-on court experience.
Yeah, crash course.
To become comfortable in the courtroom. And then I just answered an ad in the Law Journal for a law firm that was looking for a brand new, a criminal defense attorney. And I said, well, let's give this a shot. So I went for the interview, and I got hired on the spot, and it wound up being with an attorney who was a very well-respected criminal defense attorney in New York. And I started as an associate, and I worked there for 17 years and ultimately became a partner.
Right. And so just to rewind slightly, I wanted to get us to that point, talking about being a criminal defense attorney and representing people who, maybe the system isn't working for, it didn't work for. We don't need the whole entire story, but which it'd be remiss to not mention Jon-Adrian Velazquez.
Yeah.
I urge people, if is it available online? The episode of
the Dateline episode from 2012 already.
Wow, God, that was a long. Feels like it was last year. So there's a Dateline.
Not to him.
No, I'm sure not to him. So there's a Dateline episode in which you were on because you and your partner represented this gentleman who was, quite clearly wrongly convicted, and he's been in prison for nearly 20 years now.
Yeah.
His son hasn't even gotten to know him outside of prison.
Yeah, two sons.
Yeah. And
it's a horrifying story. And his name is Jon-Adrian Velazquez. And if you Google Jon-Adrian Velazquez, or there's a website, free Jon-Adrian Velazquez, that I believe it's .org. And there's a Facebook page.
Right.
And so so the law firm that I worked for years, I left 2 years ago. I've stayed involved in this case, but
because
Robert Gottlieb, my partner, is really the person who's spearheading it at this point, and the associates at the firm there. But it's an ongoing effort. We recently filed another motion, a 440 motion, it's called, based on newly discovered evidence.
To try to turn over the original conviction and original decision.
Yeah, there's a court date scheduled for August, and I believe that there's going to be another press conference that day.
Oh, interesting.
On the day of the court appearance. I mean, it was a murder of a retired New York City police detective who was running an illegal numbers joint in Manhattan. And it was basically a robbery gone wrong, is what it appeared to be, by two men who were described by all of the people at the scene at the time as a light-skinned black man with braids, who was the gunman, and a dark-skinned black man. And my client was a light-skinned Hispanic male who never had braids.
And if I'm remembering correctly, it was literally an instance where they brought in a witness, and the officer who was dealing with him pretty much said, like, hey, you're going to pick a headshot out of these headshots we have, these mug shots.
You're going to sit in this room till you
find the guy that did it.
Till you pick somebody.
And if you don't pick somebody, you're the guy.
Yeah.
And he pretty much just picked the first guy. I mean, he just randomly pointed. And now the guy that he randomly pointed to ends up serving, at this point now, what's been 20 years in prison almost. And like, it really is a fascinating and heartbreaking story. And that's one of those stories that I whenever I have to talk about you, I mean, I'm so incredibly proud of your efforts getting to watch that episode of Dateline NBC, which won an Emmy, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know.
Am I making that up? I could have sworn that episode.
No, it was nominated.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so that is why the defense attorney is so incredibly crucial, because here's an instance where the system just didn't work. And I couldn't be more proud of you for your efforts of that. And I always tell people that it's such a weird juxtaposition because my brother is a police officer, and it's one of those instances where I am incredibly proud of my brother as a police officer. I truly believe in my heart he's an incredible officer. I've seen him firsthand with members of the public and how he talks to people and the amount of respect. So super successful defense attorney, super successful police officer, entertainment, right? Me in the middle. Like, what was I going to do? I had no other choice.
Write a sitcom about us.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because Craig and I would joke all the time. We've had very funny conversations and intense conversations.
Didn't you go on a ride along with him once?
No, because I said... No, because he was afraid that I would throw my cards out the window and tell everyone to remain silent. And he wasn't wrong. How on earth could I go on a ride along and allow him to speak to any of these people, or allow them to speak to him? More importantly, we would always joke about that though. That we've had some really interesting conversations where there's sometimes where we're on the same side and there's sometimes that we're on polar opposites, but we've always had incredible respect for one another.
And that's the testament to the types of people you are and what makes you good at those two jobs. Right. Because the people who can't even or aren't even willing to see the other side, or like that's. But so here you are. You're a defense attorney, 17 years. We're going to save some stuff maybe for future conversations. At this point, you are a mother of 3 in which you went through an adoption situation for all 3 children. You're working in New York City, living on the island. One day I find out that my sister has taken up yoga and she's gotten really involved in yoga. And I get a phone call one day from you were in your and that was going on for a while you were an attorney.
Yeah.
And then one day we started chatting when I was actually, coincidentally enough, in Vegas visiting my brother, and it's all about like, I'm done. I think I'm leaving law. I think I'm over it. I'm like, that's got to be 17 years.
Yeah.
What is it like transitioning from something that there was a large period of my life where I wouldn't say my sister Celia. I would say my lawyer sister Celia. It was so much a part of who you are.
It was almost all of what I was.
Almost all of what you was.
Yeah. And it was and I loved what I did. I mean, I didn't leave the practice of law because I didn't enjoy it.
Right.
And I worked at a fabulous law firm, and I have 3 children, and I who all of whom are adopted. And I say that because I worked really hard to get them.
Right.
Not that people who give birth biologically, ladies, I know it's difficult, but but there was a lot of heartache and turmoil, and I worked so hard to have my children, and then I found myself in a place where I wasn't really getting to spend time with them and being a part of their lives in the way that I had envisioned I would be when I envisioned having children.
When you started adopting, and getting to the process of having children.
And it wasn't a good thing, a bad thing. It was just kind of the way my life had evolved, and evolved that way because I put my career first. And it's going to sound really harsh, but my career had to come first, and it was the work that I did was so important. And
if you were the type of person who put it second, your job itself would suffer.
Yeah,
you can't. I
mean,
the
people
have to,
that I represented would suffer, and I took my job very seriously, and so it always came first. And
in that way, you and Craig are so similar.
Yeah.
You and our brother are so similar because he is that way. Like Craig, like being an officer is who he is. And he's told me it's so hard for him sometimes to sit at home and shut it off.
Yeah.
To not think about what happened on the call the night before, what happened. Like he needs to be in it so that when he goes out, he's safe and he can do his job and he can serve the community in a way that is properly and undistracted. And so it's like you two are for going two separate directions. You're very, very similar in that nature.
You know what? And think about it. For somebody to be arrested, a lot of the time, right? It's the first time that's ever happened to them. And it's the most traumatic,
experience,
awful experience that's ever happened to them in their whole life. Right. And so he's on one end of it and I'm on the other end of it, but we're both dealing with that human life that's going through that experience. And so that's like something that if you have any level of compassion, I think as a person, you don't just check that at your office door or the precinct door and go home and just carry on with life.
Become a different person.
Yeah, it really, it's something that you're carrying all that stuff around all the time. And so I had gotten to a point, and it wasn't like, just it wasn't like I woke up one day and said, oh God, I can't do this anymore. But it was a gradual over time, and it was probably like the last 3 or 4 years that I was practicing.
At one point it was a transition because at one point didn't you cut down to like, okay, now I'm really only in the office 2 days, 3 days a week. Well, and you were doing longer days, but fewer of them.
Yeah. And I tried the part-time thing, but it's impossible.
It's the same thing. Like you said, you can't half in.
And then it was sort of like, all right, well, 3 days isn't working. Let me work 4 days. And then it turns into, well, we're on trial, so I have to work all the time. And it was really difficult. And I felt that every day someone was mad at me, whether it was my law partner, my mother who was taking care of my kids, my husband
who lived next door.
Yeah. And my, or my kids, somebody was mad at me every day. And it was a lot of juggling of emotions every day. And so what really the real turning point for me, I had at this time I'd gone through my yoga teacher training and found yoga as a way to kind of decompress while I was living this kind of hectic life.
And I'm sure what yoga does for mind probably helped you compartmentalize stuff, helped you kind of maybe see things clearer, get a clearer view of kind of
and to be kinder to myself.
Okay, that's fair.
To really
how do you do that? What's that like?
Time to really listen to where yoga really came in for me in the practice of law. Well, when I initially started, it was because everyone knew when I was in a yoga class, I didn't have my phone.
Oh.
So they couldn't reach me.
Interesting.
Right? So I didn't have to be reached, and I didn't have to check my phone to make sure somebody wasn't trying to reach me. So
because that's the other thing too. Being a lawyer in the modern era where literally we are carrying around I always tell people, like, we live in a world where we're in a constant conversation with everybody we've ever met right now because of text message chains, and because I am in a conversation with 17 people simultaneously as we do this conversation, even if I'm not looking at my phone. And so being a lawyer, a job that already draws so much of who you are and it requires so much of your attention, must be like tenfold in the era of having a smartphone in your pocket.
Yeah.
Which makes it even harder then to drop it when you're at home.
Yeah. Well, years ago, I would go to court.
Yeah.
I go to a payphone after court. Wow. Use my calling card number to call back. I'm coming back.
Oh,
and
really?
From the time that I called and said I was coming back until I got back, no one could reach me.
Right. It was like, oh, where's she? Have you heard?
Yeah.
Oh, she's on her way back right now.
Right.
She just called from,
How sad that we look back at that
it was a million. It wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago,
really,
and it was such a much better way of life. And so
that's the way you lean.
Yeah. Oh, if I could flush my phone down the toilet and be done with technology, I would be a fan.
I live sort of in the shades of gray area where I'm like, you know what? This has given us so much.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, because you don't have children yet.
Okay.
Once you have children who become zombies to the devices.
Oh.
Right? Your nieces and nephews.
Admittedly, I have witnessed that.
Yeah, exactly.
There are plenty of times where I will walk into one of the girls' room. I'm visiting Craig, and I'm just like, hello, and I'm waving my hands above my head like because they're just, So I get that.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that.
So I started doing yoga for that reason, and then the more I did it, the better I felt about myself physically, about myself mentally. It was a physical workout, but a very quieting of the mind at the same time, which was so interesting to me.
Did you say that it made yourself feel better about yourself
Yeah.
physically, mentally, emotionally? Like, was there something that gave you, because I feel like in order to be a defense attorney and the type of person that I know you are, just as my sister, you're a confident woman. You've always been a confident, strong woman. You're very bullheaded, and I feel like confidence and Celia are, in my brain, we're always hand in hand. And I always used to use you as an example when I talked about how I kind of wanted to carry myself and how I wanted to know myself.
Aww.
So it's interesting for me to hear you say like, oh, when I started yoga, then I finally started. So like, was it strictly the fact that you felt guilty maybe not being home with the kids, or was it other stuff? Like, was there other stuff that made you feel bad about yourself?
Not feeling bad about myself necessarily, but sort of taking time to really like learn more about myself, right? To be like, I was always very sure of myself, very confident. But there's the persona that you give off, and then there's the quiet time when you reflect and say like, who am I really? Like, because I, like you said, I was Celia the lawyer, and that's who I was to myself. And that was my identity when I went to a party and got in a conversation with someone. It was usually about my work, and that became like who I was.
And even now, after you've transitioned, which I know I'm jumping a little bit ahead here, like we walked yesterday and someone was like, I got a lawyer question for you. It's like, I mean, like it's always, it's never going to leave you.
And that's not a bad thing.
No.
You know, but
I think, like you said, you don't hate law.
No. But what wound up happening as I got further into what yoga was all about, it was this idea of ego. And so I knew every day when I would get in my car and drive to Manhattan that there was like this force that was pulling me back home because I wanted to be with my children. I wanted to be more involved in their lives. But at the same time, I needed to get to the city, and I needed to be in that, that go world.
And it is interesting too, just the dichotomy of where you lived versus where you work. Because, people who aren't familiar with the Northeast and New York, when you say you're from New York, everybody assumes that everybody lives in a giant city.
Yeah.
Or like a Brooklyn or that kind of. It's like, no, like out on the island here, like it's suburbia.
Quiet and peaceful.
It's quiet. It's peaceful. Yeah. There's beautiful trees. There's winding roads.
Yeah. And I started to realize that the reason why I was continuing to just go, even when my heart was telling me, you should really go to this school function.
Sure.
Right? You should really know what your kids are doing for homework.
Right.
It was my ego that, because people looked at me and said, you're fantastic. Like, you're a lawyer, you have 3 children, you work in the city, you have a great husband, a beautiful home. How do you do it all? That's amazing.
It's that sort of facade of
it's like Facebook, right? When people are like, oh, everything looks wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to put, I'm not putting a bad picture on Facebook.
Sure,
like
it's an old trope. It's that old trope, but it is really still poignant to say. It's like, don't compare your behind the scenes to somebody else's highlight reel.
Yeah, come on. So that was because I was juggling so much, and because, like I said, someone who's mad at me every day, when people would look at me and say, oh, you're doing great, you're amazing, you're awesome, I would be like, oh, okay, good. They still think so. You hold on to it, but it's artificial.
Right.
And I started thinking, wow, I'm holding so tight onto this view that people have of me, but they're not living my life.
No.
And when my son, who 2 years ago turned 10, I thought, wow, like 10 years went by super fast. He was a little tiny baby a week ago, and now he's 10 and is moving away from me. Like, he doesn't need me as much. And I'm going to blink again. He's going to be 20 and I'm going to feel like an ass. Like, I've missed it all. And now he doesn't even need me anymore. And I didn't want that to happen. That was like my biggest fear, was that the time would just continue to go by so fast, and that I would not have had the courage to make a decision because of my ego.
Right.
So yoga was huge in just bringing me to that point where I could be honest with myself.
Can I? We've never spoken about this. I don't recall, at least.
Yeah.
Have you ever done therapy? Have you ever spoken to anybody?
I did, like years ago
Okay.
when I was in college, I suffered from an eating disorder.
Okay.
So I saw a psychologist
Okay,
back
so
then, briefly, who told me that I wasn't going to kill myself by being anorexic.
Right.
So I was like, oh, okay, good.
Okay.
So I'll just continue.
Great.
Yeah, that was like really good.
Right.
I don't remember her name, thankfully, or I would say it. But
so as an adult, like you, maybe like that, because here's the thing. So I started speaking to somebody years ago, and I've fallen in and out of it. One, because of money, admittedly convenience. Sometimes it's just hard to make the time for it. But I have found that like the actual act of sitting and speaking with a therapist, or whether I would be in group, it's not just that. It's whatever that feeling gives you, and it could be another thing. And I feel like for you, yoga was your therapy.
Totally. 100%.
Yoga is what allowed your brain to switch that dynamic mode and to realize, oh, I want to think about what I'm saying, what I'm thinking. More so, you know what I mean? Like, because a lot of people were always so worried about the words that we say, and we don't really wonder, should I be thinking this?
Yeah.
Or should I, you know what I mean? And once you start.
Well, as you know, we're a society that just we go. And we are so detached from ourselves, right? Most of the day, like think about how do you remember how you even got here this morning, right? Like you're driving in your car, your mind is going in a million directions, right? Half the time we're getting text messages or Facebook messages, and we're constantly distracted from ourselves, right? So when do you really get the time to stop, be quiet, go within?
Right.
That's where yoga and meditation really can be transformative, because whereas years ago, I think we were way more able to do those things kind of organically without even putting a label on it, right? We could sit and, we could sit quietly in a doctor's office and wait for our appointment. And, we may have read a magazine,
maybe.
But there were way more opportunities to have quiet time than there are now, because the second that we have quiet time now, we pick up a device to distract ourselves, to take ourselves away from ourselves. So,
do you ever do that thing where you realize that your phone isn't near you, and even though you're engaged in something else, you have like that flutter,
anxiety,
that panic, that like, oh my, where's my device? I mean, literally, it's a limb. It's achieved limb status, and when it's not near you, you feel like you've been severed in some way. So I totally understand that.
Yeah, and have a 12-year-old child.
Oh, God,
it's the best form of punishment. I said to someone the other day, I only gave my son a phone so that I could take it away.
That's fantastic. Yeah, because what more? Like, what could be worse at this point?
No worse.
It's
punishment.
the equivalent of growing
punishment.
up. The equivalent of growing up like no TV. Like, oh, I can't watch TV.
My worst punishment growing up.
What?
That I couldn't watch Donnie Marie on Friday night. That was my worst punishment. That was a fate worse than death to me. Yeah.
That was what Sue had to say. The one thing.
Donnie, it was the only thing. I kid you not.
She would say to you, 2 names. And you'd be like, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'll eat my greens or whatever.
To me was just fate worse than death. No Donnie Marie.
So to kind of continue with this.
Myself.
Yeah. I wasn't going to say it. So to continue this, you discover yoga. It gives you this feeling. It gives you this state of mind that now you're starting to become a little more introspective. You're trying to be a little more self-realizing. At what point do you rip the Band-Aid off? At what point do you say, like, okay, I mean, you mentioned that the 10th birthday, your oldest son's 10th birthday was sort of the catalyst.
Yeah.
How soon after that are you officially?
Really soon. Actually, a few days before his birthday.
Wow.
And it was not a day that I planned. It wasn't like I didn't go to work that day thinking that was going to be my last day.
Oh, really? It was that instantaneous?
No, it was sort of I was working on an article for the Law Journal at the time, something that we were writing at the firm. And it was like I was having like trouble kind of just focusing myself, and I was really conflicted, and I kept finding myself in this period or this state of being conflicted with wanting to spend more time at home and not being able to, and that we were also involved in a case at the time that was all consuming, taking up a lot of time, and it had gone on for over a year, and it really had taken its toll on me, and my partner said to me, what's going on with you? I feel like something's up with you. And it's taking you a long time with this article. What's going on? And at that moment, I thought to myself, I could just continue to just say everything's fine and I'm good. No, everything's fine. Like, I can handle everything. I can do this all, or I could just like be completely honest with what I was feeling at that moment. And so I was honest, and I chose to be honest that day. And when I said, I don't think that I can do this anymore, or that I want to do it anymore, and that was it. And
was that the first time you sort of like said that out loud?
Yeah, and meant it. Like there had been.
Oh yeah, you do that thing where you go like, I hate this. I'm done with this. I've quit this.
Yeah. There.
10 minutes later.
And you know what? I'd been struggling for a while with these conflicting feelings. Right. So there had certainly been times that, that I thought, I don't know if I could do this anymore, and I could keep this up, and I'm not really happy. But then I would back off and say, no, what am I, crazy? This is my whole life. This is my whole identity. I've worked so hard for this. I've worked so hard to get where I am. And but that day I really listened to what was like internal, genuinely in my soul,
right.
And it was difficult. It wasn't like, it was like, oh, that's fantastic. I'm going to now go and live my dream. Right. It was really difficult.
I'm sure of it.
Really difficult. And
what was the response from not great?
Heartache. It was not, it's still to this day. It's not
it's hard.
It's hard because that was, for a lot of people in my life, that was all that they knew me to be.
Sure.
And so it's been a real adjustment, but it's been 2 years. Yeah. And I'm in this really good place, and I've really just started to listen to myself more, and to, kind of be open.
And I was gonna say, and this is not to sound like a backhanded compliment by any means, but you and I don't see or speak as nearly as much as I wish we did. It's hard when you're on opposite sides of the country. You with 3 kids and a family, and me not having money to get anywhere. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you're easier now.
Yeah.
Honestly. And like, you were like, just in the way that you even speak, in the way that, and I've always, again, I mentioned before, I love that you were always so confident and hard-headed and direct. And you are, I feel like I get a lot of that from you, or it's just in us in general. Yeah. It's in genes, you know? But just, you're that same person, but you're just easier. Mm-hmm. You just seem to have your shoulders sit a little bit more relaxed than they used to.
Yeah.
You just,
big time.
Yeah. You tend to be, I hate to use the term frantic, but that's sort of something that comes to mind. You tend to be a significantly less.
Yeah. That I was always on.
Right. That's what it is.
I was always on, and always kind of waiting for, that the criminal defense lawyer in me never shut off. Right. So it was always kind of there. I was always checking my phone. I was always worried that I was missing a text or an email. And I don't live that way anymore. Right. And I'm in this, really good place of also wanting to share this with other people, because even it's not to say that everybody should just, pack it in and become a yoga teacher and, go to Kripalu. And
let me ask you this, what was it like at home when you told the kids that you were going to be, because there has to be some transition, because you had a massive support system in that time when you were out there. Your mother, who, like we said, lived right next door, always around, willing to keep up until Nana passed away. Nana was watching them when they were very little, if I'm not mistaken. You had this fantastic support system. So when things kind of changed, was that transition really difficult on you, or was it how was it on the kids too?
Thankfully, everyone has been so incredibly supportive.
Really?
My husband first and foremost, right, who's an amazing guy.
Yeah, also that's got to be a strain on, you're leaving your job as a defense attorney, and you're gonna start teaching yoga. Yeah, that's gotta be tough.
$40 a class. You know, right. That he was incredibly supportive, but he lived with me through the last 17 years of. And
nobody's going to understand your position better than him.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, so the trade-off for him was a wife who was
happy. A little easier.
Easier.
Yeah, easier.
Right?
Yeah,
A little
right.
easier. And and my mom has always been so supportive and so in favor of my decision because again, she, they were the crew.
Yeah.
They were there
Right.
and,
They were the pit crew
they were the
swapping tires.
yeah.
Yeah. Every time you got home.
So, they saw all of the things that everyone else who said, thought, oh, you have it all together.
Right,
Everything
yeah.
is so wonderful. Yeah, but they saw the times that weren't so
They
wonderful.
saw the downside, yeah.
And so everyone was supportive. My
Gotcha.
kids, the funny part about that is we also had a babysitter who's a very special part of our family. And that was, I think, the hardest part for them
Right. Yeah.
was that,
We don't really need you
Janina was
anymore.
no longer going to be there every day. And, and that was a hard adjustment for them because they love and adore her.
Was there like
as we all do.
Were there any power struggles at home when you came home?
Yeah, no.
Not so much.
No, mom was
Pretty-
back.
it was just mom was back. Gotcha.
Yeah, but true to my nature, it's not as if I never envisioned myself just saying I'm going to leave the practice of law
Right.
and just sit home.
Right.
And I was teaching yoga,
Right.
but that was just filling time. That
Right.
was I was enjoying it, but it's not like I didn't leave the practice of law for the practice of yoga.
Gotcha.
That was nothing. One had nothing to do with the other in that way. It wasn't like a replacement. I just knew that I needed to make a change in my life, and I think most importantly, I was open.
Okay.
I was just open to whatever was going to come next,
Right.
and I with a firm belief that there was something that would come next for me, and so I spent like a good week after I left doing dub smashes.
I remember the dub smash phase.
Like,
oh my God, every single day.
Again, it's in our blood.
Right, every day, Celia discovered. Oh, by the way, you discovered dub smash like a year after it was over. Okay.
Okay. I think that's false.
It was so done.
Okay.
And
But
all
you know
of a
what?
sudden,
I reinvented dub smash. I reinvented it.
She was
People
doing
still
movies,
ask me to
movies, TV show lines.
I mean, I had props for my dub. I was
they were
like,
very elaborate dub smashes.
Elaborate dub smashes, and so that occupied some of my time.
I love it.
Yeah.
She goes from criminal defense attorney to dub smasher. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I actually put a bunch of them on YouTube. If you Google it, you can actually find some of my amazing, incredible dub smashes. But yeah, I was a little bit lost for a little bit, and but again, and I've said this to, I may have said it to you. I said it to somebody this week. I said, I forgot who it was. Somebody who was texting me and was kind of in a place, and I said, the miracles in our life happen when we stop trying to figure it all out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I kind of live by now. It's like I really know not to overthink anything because the more that you try to figure it out, the less you're going to figure out.
And that could not be further from your mindset as the neutral Celia.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you're the person who needs to figure everything out.
If you needs to have a plan.
I was just about to say, if there's no plan,
yeah. But my plan is that I know that I'm just going to always try my best.
Your plan is to,
It's interesting for, in yoga, there's all these lessons and there's all of these yoga texts and that you can just get such rich, just life lessons from. And so there's this conversation in the Bhagavad Gita, which is like the oldest text on yoga. And it's a conversation between God, Krishna in the Hindu faith, and Arjuna, who is a warrior prince. And they're having this conversation, and Krishna says, and I won't get into the whole long story of it, but suffice it to say that Krishna says to Arjuna that don't be attached to the results, right? Don't attach to the results of your actions. Just give your best, and whatever is going to come is going to come. As long as you give your best, you know that when you're coming from that place, the result will be the result, and it will be the best that it's going to be.
Sure.
And I think that's a great way to live
because
we so often, we look at the end game and we get so attached to that. But if you attach to that, you're missing the journey.
Sure.
And so, now I'm kind of living in the journey, and
That's great.
I was, now I have a new business that
I was going to transition this into the obvious. Like, we are literally sitting in this establishment called The Workshop.
Yeah.
And this is your place. How did The Workshop come to be, and what is it? What's the point of this facility?
Yeah, it's crazy that we're sitting in the workshop.
Crazy.
It's crazy. So I started going to Kripalu. While I was a lawyer, I was going to Kripalu a lot. And Kripalu is a yoga retreat center in the Berkshires in Massachusetts. And I started going there. And the first time I was there, I was changed forever because it's the most, it's just like an incredibly peaceful place, and a place where there's, you just kind of, you're there with your kindred spirits.
Sure,
like people there are like-minded.
Right.
It's just the food is clean, and the people there range from every age. There's every race, both genders,
right,
as many genders as there are now, right? There's it's just a place that's all accepting and just incredibly nourishing for the soul.
Right.
And
Earth plus humanity.
Yeah,
that's what I always say. Like, that's my favorite place. First thing is I want a place where the earth is fantastic, and then I want to see some humanity. Those are the layers of my favorite places.
And that's Kripalu.
It's
well, and it's funny because I just this past weekend I took my husband and my mom there for just to show them. We happened to be in Massachusetts, and I was like, we have to stop into Kripalu. They had never seen it.
Oh, and you'd spent so much time there.
Yeah, it's my favorite place on earth. Yeah. And I went on to do my 500-hour yoga teacher training there, and I just like I love it there. Right. And so I take them there, and my husband, we get there, and he's like, this is not at all what I expected. And he's like, it looks like an insane asylum. So the building from the outside is not attractive.
It's not an attractive facility.
It was an old Buddhist monastery. So it's very bare bones, but the grounds themselves are breathtaking, and he admitted that. Right. But the grounds are breathtaking, and inside the building is a whole different feel than the outside of the building. Yeah, but it's just the most incredible place that I'd ever been. And what wound up happening to me is every time I would go, when I would leave, I was so elated when I would be going there. When I would be leaving, I would be feeling like I was like, I didn't want to leave, and I was leaving behind this incredible feeling, and so I would take it with me, and then it would kind of bleed out of me over time as I would get home. And
that's I talk a lot. You haven't met him yet, but my best friend Tony, who's a co-star in my movie,
I've seen a lot of Tony.
Seen a lot of Tony. Tony always talks about exactly that. He's from Wisconsin. He loves going home to Wisconsin. He says like, he needs to go home so that his battery can charge up. He needs to get all of the the Wisconsin, all of his, and then he comes to LA, and then it slowly goes down. Then eventually he's empty, and he's like, I'm empty. Listen, I gotta, goes back up, recharges again. And every time he comes back, he's all like hit the ground running and real high spirited. And then like, once the battery gets lower, that's when sort of he gets a little more depressed, a little bit more like, I need to go home for a little while.
Yeah, so. Exactly the same. Yeah. Exactly the same. And so when I stopped practicing law, and I, had like sky's the limit now.
Yeah. The dub smash era.
Yeah. Post dub smash.
Oh, okay.
When I got out of the dub smash cloud, I thought, I want to create a place that I can feel that way, and where other people can feel that way, but you don't have to invest a lot of money, and you don't the Kripalu is not overly expensive, but it's still, it's a place where
and it's still a trip if you don't live close by,
right?
Yeah.
It's in Massachusetts, and you have to spend nights there, whatever. Right. And I wanted to create a space that was local, that where you could kind of have that feeling, even if it's just for an hour, right? Even if you just go and like hang out for an hour, just to get that infusion of goodness. Right. And so I envisioned this place that would have a meditation room and a sharing library, and eventually like a cafe, and something a place where people could come and feel a part of they were part of a community, where we would have workshops all the time. Sure. And where people could come and learn something new, and come to an art class, even if you've never picked up a paintbrush, or make some jewelry, or
find a little inspiration.
Find a little inspiration. Like come to a writing workshop if you've always wanted to write a book or whatever.
Right.
Do yoga, meditate. So so that was kind of in my mind of what I wanted to do. No idea how I would begin this.
Right.
And I was at a block party, and my friend Marianne was sitting with me, and she owned a place in the village called Kiss My Cake, a really awesome
Kiss My Cake.
Okay. And Kiss My Cake.
Sure.
And it's
you have to say it with some
Kiss My
sass.
Cake. But it's actually, little plug here. If you're in Huntington Village, best lunch. They serve in addition to the amazing macaroons and cupcakes, they serve ridiculously healthy and amazing lunches there. So little plug for Kiss My Cake.
There you go.
New York Avenue, Huntington. But so Marianne owned that business, and she'd also been certified in Kundalini yoga. So she was kind of spoke my language.
Right, yeah.
And so she was like, what are you gonna do? Like, I can't believe that you left your law firm. Like, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna open up a yoga studio? Like, like is that like, what you envision for yourself? And I'm like, no, totally not. Didn't want to open up a yoga studio. I, teach at the time. I was teaching at a few studios that I was very connected to, and I don't want to compete.
You don't want to create competition.
Yeah, I don't want to compete with them, and they're doing a great job.
Did it also maybe not appeal to you, like seeing it from that side?
Yeah, and
like,
you know what?
You'd rather be a teacher who came into that space than run that space.
Yeah, and the thing for me, the reason why I wouldn't want to have a yoga studio just for my own vision was because, you would come and take a class or teach a class, and then you leave and you lock the door, and the studio is then closed until the next class.
It's just an empty building.
Yeah, and although the studios that I teach at and that I go to, there is a sense of community. It's not like a Corpalo feel. It's a little bit less, like connected. Yeah. So I wanted to have something more, and I didn't want it to be just people who wanted to do yoga. I wanted it to be people who had never done yoga, who wanted to just do something else.
And also to that extent, like you've obviously said to me tons of times, I just need to start, and I've contemplated it. It's like, but it is also kind of daunting.
Yeah.
And I feel like coming to a yoga at a place like this seem like where it's like, oh, we do a class here and there. It's more like going to it like at a Y than it is like going to this yoga studio where people are like really intense.
Yeah, because you're like, I was here the other night painting a picture, and now they're having a yoga class.
It's
so
more
I'm
of a
gonna
community.
try it out.
Yeah, it's more of a community center where I'm going to go to I'm going to do different things maybe with the same people.
Right.
You want to find a place that's where you kind of feel comfortable. Doing a thing that maybe you might not be great at, or
you'd
that
rather run with a group of friends,
right? Exactly.
Than go run on a treadmill amongst some strangers. Exactly. Yeah. So not to say that that's the way I view yoga studio, but that's for the business that I saw for myself. I really wanted something that more, was along the lines of a community, a community feel. And so she said, my friend Marianne said to me, "Oh my God, that's crazy that you're saying this. I have a friend, Mima, who has the exact same vision. She's been talking to me about this for like 3 years, wanting to do this exact thing. You guys should meet."
Right.
Well, I had been going to yoga and taking classes at a place where there was a Mima in my yoga class. And we were just acquaintances. And I said, okay, what are the odds that there are like more than one Mima?
Yeah, that's a very uncommon name.
Yeah, in Huntington, New York.
That's
anyway.
Not like a nickname for somebody's grandma or something.
Yeah, exactly. So I said, I think I know Mima. So she showed me a picture. I'm like, I know
that's
Mima.
Her. Yeah, she's in my class.
So Mima and I, at the next time that we were in yoga together, we said, we really need to talk. And so we got together, and from that day on, every week we would meet every Tuesday
at Kiss My Cake.
Because our yoga class was in someplace else, so we would meet at this little coffee shop, and every week it kind of progressed from like, so what do you want to do? What do you want to do? To hey, next week why don't we have some ideas on what kind of workshops would we envision having at this place that we didn't even have a name for.
What would be like a mock week calendar or a mock week schedule? Yeah.
Yeah. And we, what kind of presenters do we see ourselves having, and what does the place look like? And as it evolved, and then we were like, well, next week, let's think of some names. And the first name that we actually came up with was the Student Union.
The student union.
And we thought
so clinical sounding.
Yeah.
I feel like, who do you bank with? Oh, the student union?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, it's like very.
Well, but so our thought was that like, so yoga means to yoke or to unite, right?
Okay.
Union. And students,
Oh,
like we
okay.
thought, so it was more like
I get it.
a way of, like we're the students of life, right? We're
Okay.
constantly learning new things. You come to this place to learn new things and to unite with people and to unite with yourself. And so it had this other meaning.
Unfortunately,
and then I told my mother, and my mother
it.
was like, "Well, I would never go to the student union. Like, I think of like, you'd have to be in your 20s to go to the student union. I would never go to the student union." So I was like, "Okay."
He's totally right.
And here I was like all hyped on this. I'm like, ready for
Just
it.
totally crashed.
Wait for it.
Yeah.
We have the name. Wait for it. The student union.
I don't like it.
Wah, wah. Yeah. So we just abandoned that
Sure,
idea.
of course. You had to.
Yeah, we weren't getting rave reviews, but then, then we were constantly talking about like what workshops would we do? What workshops would we do? And then one day, I don't even remember if it was me or Mima, but we were like, "What about the workshop?
Just call it the workshop."
Yeah, and so we decided to hyphenate it instead of making it just the workshop, like like a place,
Right.
The work -shop because it's like the place where you come to do the work.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And, and that's really like from our perspective, what, we're doing here
Beautiful.
in this life is we're doing the work. We're working on ourselves. And, so you can come to the workshop to work on different things about yourself. And, and they don't have to be all really deep. Like, we have I told you, I was telling you last night, we have an acting improv night. That's my favorite night of the month.
Right.
And
so here you are, you now co-run this facility, this workshop, and like, where are you headspace wise? Like, obviously, like we said, people are still like, "Oh, I got a law question for you."
Yeah.
Like, you're now back in a position where you are a boss, even though you're doing something that's more lax and laid back. Like, finding this, like, where are you in mindset of like, oh, because now it's a business.
Yeah.
You went from like doing something that's like, a lawyer isn't necessarily like the business mindset as much as it is about a person, about people, about, like, how is that transition? What do you find yourself using something from who you were as a lawyer?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
I cannot be schnookered. There was a guy that was trying to sell us some advertising stuff, and I was like, yeah, I need some more time. I'm not ready to make this decision. And he was like, well, why don't we do this? Why don't I fill out the contract and you sign it? But like, I won't do anything with it until you tell me. And I was like, I might as well just hand over my law degree to you because, so
sign this contract.
Yeah. So, there's lots from running a law firm that translate into running any business.
Oh yeah, I guess that's right. Because you were a part. Yeah, that's right. You were running that firm. I guess. Yeah, I guess there's.
So dealing with people and navigating those waters, and I think that was always one of my strengths. Even at my firm, I was kind of the mama hen, and and I think I was very good at at that part of it. But it's interesting because I find in this space, I'm not as rigid.
Right.
I think it's enabled me to kind of be a little bit more lighthearted.
Right.
And it's a little easier to do that in this space than it is to do that in a law firm.
So I think you are one of the best people.
I think you are one of the best people.
I think you're one of the best people.
And I get such a, like I started off saying before, such a kick out of, you and me, and having not grown up in the same house, right? And
because you lived with your mother,
yeah,
I lived with my mother,
right? But we are so much alike, and our interests,
right.
There's
our
interests,
crossover,
a lot of crossover, and
the Venn diagram of Celia and Jake is, that middle ground is a pretty large
huge.
Middle ground.
Yeah.
But so how do people find the workshop online, and as well as for people on the island? Go ahead and give us the actual details.
The website is thework-shop.com or thework-shop.com. And we have a Facebook page. We're on Instagram. And so we're doing newer things all the time. We're We have a Crystal of the Month club, so you can go on our website and get information about that. And we send people a different crystal every month, and could be any form, rock, crystal, or jewelry, or which is a fun little gift to get for yourself.
And you ship that,
give to someone
domestically. You ship that all over the country.
Yep. And so we do that. We have we're going to start workshops to go. So if you live in California and you want to do some of our workshops, we'll send you a kit with a link to
fantastic.
How to do the workshop. Have a fun night with your friends, and
awesome.
It comes in cool packaging, and so we offer all kinds of cool workshops.
Does the workshop
all on our website?
Does the workshop have social media pages?
Yep. So we have
Where are they?
Facebook page.
Plug them up.
We have Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
What is Instagram?
I don't know.
You don't know what it is?
Nima knows that.
I'm sure if you just search the workshop, I'll post the links to it if you want to find it. Oh, I love you so much.
Drop a pin, right?
What about yoga? As far as you, are you still teaching?
So I still teach. My yoga website is celiagordonyoga.com.
And it's also Celia Gordon Yoga on Instagram, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and I teach at the Funky Om in Huntington. There's 2 locations, and that's the funkyom.com, a fantastic yoga studio.
You got to get me into shape.
And I do.
You got to whip me up. Hey, you're not supposed to have to say it so quickly.
Yeah, no, I do.
Well, as always, please find me on Twitter at LiquidJake and follow Elaborate at ElaboratePod on Instagram and Twitter and all that fun stuff. And as usual, at It's Dragon Wagon for all things Dragon Wagon Radio. Thank you so much to everybody who's continuing to listen to the show. If you're listening on iTunes, please leave a review. Those iTunes reviews are so incredibly important. This has been hands down one of my favorite conversations, Celia. I love you so much.
I love you more.
You guys, you don't get it. I'm sitting here. He's just so handsome. He's got this face and this beard, and his name is Matt Kessler. Matt, you have a podcast.
I do have a podcast. It is called Too Many Records. It is an extension of a YouTube show that existed already called Too Many Records. And it's because I have a lot of freaking records.
What's a lot of records?
I have about 1,500 vinyl LPs, and it's growing by the day.
That's a lot of records.
Yeah, so on the show, I talk about records. I nerd out about music with people. And it's a real good time, so I hope you'll listen if you like tunes.
How do we listen?
You go to iTunes or Stitcher, and you can download it there, or go to toomanyrecords.net.
I have an old Hall & Oates record I'd like to sell you.
Nope.
It's Dragon Wagon.